In the summer of 1974, a ship sat alone in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, holding perfectly still over a single point of empty water. To anyone who asked, she was a mining vessel. She belonged to the strangest rich man in America, Howard Hughes. And she had come, the story went, to vacuum precious metal off the floor of the sea. It was a lie. One of the most expensive lies the United States ever told. 3 miles beneath her, in the cold and the dark, lay a Soviet submarine, and the ship on the surface had come to steal it. Her name was K-129. 6 years before, she had sailed out of a base in the Soviet Far East and simply never come home. 98 men, 3 ballistic missiles, and on the noses of those missiles, nuclear warheads, of the kind built to be fired at American cities. She went down in the spring of 1968. The Soviet Navy searched for weeks and could not find her. The Americans, listening on the bottom of the ocean, could. What followed cost the better part of $1 billion and 6 years of work. A ship built in secret. A steel claw the size of a building, lowered 3 miles into water no salvage had ever reached. And in the summer of 1974, that claw closed around the wreck of K-129 and began to lift. Partway up, it broke. Most of the submarine tore loose and fell back into the dark. What the Americans kept, and what they lost, has been a secret for 50 years. The rest of the boat is still down there. So is most of her crew. So, by every account the Soviets ever gave, are at least some of her warheads. The last known position of the nuclear weapons aboard K-129 is 3 miles down, in the North Pacific, where a stolen submarine slipped out of a steel claw in the summer of 1974. After that, unknown. To understand what the Americans went to such lengths to steal, you have to go back 6 years and an ocean away to a cold harbor on the far edge of the Soviet Union. The base was called Rybahi on the Kamchatka Peninsula, and on the 24th of February 1968, a submarine left it on what was meant to be a routine patrol. She was K-129, a diesel submarine, old by the standards of the day, built to carry 3 nuclear missiles within reach of the United States and to wait hidden for an order everyone prayed would never come. Her commander was Captain First Rank Vladimir Kobzar. Aboard with him were some 98 officers and men. It was her 3rd such patrol. She had sailed twice before and come home twice before. A day out, she dove, surfaced, and reported by radio that all was well. Then she went under again and turned east toward her station in the empty Pacific. That was the last anyone in the Soviet Union ever heard from her. A submarine on patrol keeps a rhythm of silence and sound. She stays hidden. But at fixed moments she rises, just enough to send a short, coded burst and tell her commanders she is alive. K-129 missed the first. The men ashore waited. Then she missed the second. By the middle of March, the Soviet Navy understood that one of its ballistic missile submarines, with its crew and its warheads, had gone silent somewhere in the largest ocean on Earth. What they did next was enormous. Dozens of ships, aircraft flying grid after grid. Other submarines pulled off their own patrols and sent out to look. After weeks, they stopped. There was nothing to raise and nothing to report. The families were told only that their man had been lost at sea. Not where, not how. For more than 25 years, the Soviet state would not even allow the names of the dead to be spoken aloud in public. Her own navy had given up, and by every reasonable expectation, she should have stayed lost. Forever. Why did she sink? It is the first question anyone asks, and it is the one question this story never answers. No one was aboard to tell it. No distress call ever came. Whatever happened to K-129 happened fast enough that 98 trained men sent not one word of warning. There are, in the end, 3 explanations, and the navies that cared about her never agreed on which. The first, and the most likely, is an accident of the most ordinary and terrible kind. A diesel submarine cannot stay under forever. To charge her batteries, she must rise near the surface and run her engines, breathing through a tube. And the battery being charged gives off hydrogen. Hydrogen, trapped in a sealed steel tube full of men, needs only a spark. Submarines of that age were lost to it before, and would be again. One reading of the evidence is that K-129 blew open from the inside just beneath the waves and went down before a single man could reach a hatch. 2 months later, on the far side of the world, an American submarine, the Scorpion, would die in almost the same way. 1968 was a cruel year beneath the sea. 4 submarines from 4 nations never came home. K-129 was only the first. The second explanation belonged to the Soviets, and many of them held it to the end of their lives. That an American submarine, shadowing K-129 too closely in the dark, had struck her and sent her down. The admiral who commanded her division believed it until the day he died. He pointed to an American boat, the Swordfish, that limped into a Japanese port soon after with a damaged sail. The Americans said the Swordfish had hit ice far from K-129. And there's a quieter problem with the collision story. The Soviets believed it, in part because the Americans later seemed to know exactly where the wreck lay. Surely, they reasoned, the only way to know was to have been there, to have done it. But the Americans had not been there. They had only listened. And that is a story all its own. There is a third explanation. You will find it in books and in films. That K-129 was a rogue trying to fire a nuclear missile at Hawaii without orders and was destroyed for it. It is dramatic. It sells. And there is nothing underneath it. No evidence supports it, and this is not a program that will pretend otherwise. But the cause was never the mystery that mattered. The mystery was what happened to the wreck itself. After the searching stopped, the Soviet Navy never told the United States it had lost a submarine. The Americans worked it out anyway. And the way they did it is the coldest, strangest part of the whole affair. What the Americans noticed first was the grief. That sudden, frantic Soviet search, dozens of ships and aircraft swarming a stretch of the Pacific, for no reason anyone would explain. And so, weeks after the fact, American technicians were sent back to their own recordings. Because the United States had been listening to that ocean the entire time, across the floor of Pacific lay a secret network of underwater microphones, wired to catch the engines of Soviet submarines. It heard almost everything, and it forgot nothing, because it wrote everything down. Somewhere in the records from early March was a sound, a short, sharp event read by the analysts as an explosion inside a hull. And because that one sound had reached several listening posts at slightly different instants, they could do something remarkable with it. They could draw a line back from each post and find the single point where every line crossed, a point in open water, far from where the Soviets were searching. 3 miles deep. There was exactly one vessel that could try. On a fine, clear morning in the middle of July 1968, the commander of the submarine Halibut, a man named Moore, was handed an order that should not have been possible to carry out. Take your boat into the open Pacific. Go to a patch of water about the size of Rhode Island. And somewhere inside it, on the floor of the sea, find one sunken submarine. The Halibut looked, from the outside, like an aging missile boat past her best years. She was nothing of the kind. 3 years before, a Navy scientist named John Craven had stripped her out and filled her with cameras and sonar and a 2-ton steel pod, towed on a cable miles below the hull, that her crew simply called the Fish. For weeks, Moore flew the Fish back and forth above the seabed, mowing the dark in long, patient stripes, while the screens aboard showed nothing but mud and stone and more mud. And then, in the 3rd week of August, the mud and the stone gave way to something made by human hands. It was K-129, broken, but there, lying on the floor of the Pacific, exactly where a sound had said she would be. The Halibut stayed and did the slow work. By the end, her crew had taken some 20,000 photographs of the wreck. Many of them developed the film with their own hands and were never told what they were looking at. When the President of the United States gave the Halibut his nation's highest award for that summer's work, the award itself was kept secret. There were photographs now. There was a target. And there were men in Washington beginning to ask an insane question. Not whether they could look at K-129, whether they could pick her up and carry her home. Raising a sunken submarine is hard enough in shallow water with divers in plain sight. K-129 lay 3 miles down. No crane could reach her. No diver could go near her. And the whole thing had to be invisible to the nation that owned her. The job went to the CIA. They called it Project Azorian. And the plan they settled on reads less like an engineering proposal than a fairy tale. They would build a ship on the surface with an opening in her belly. Down through that opening, they would lower a string of steel pipe 3 miles long, screwed together one section at a time as it sank. At the bottom of that pipe would hang a vast mechanical claw built to settle onto the seabed, close its arms around the broken hull, and lift her, gently, all the way back up, into the ship. The men who built the claw gave it a name, Clementine, like the song, about a girl who was lost and gone forever, and none of it could be admitted to exist. So the United States reached for the one man in the country whose every strange and secret act the public already took for granted. Howard Hughes, aviator, film producer, billionaire recluse. A man so famously eccentric that if his name were attached to a bizarre and ruinously costly ship, the world would simply shrug and assume it was another of his obsessions. It was a brilliant lie because it explained everything. A giant ship. Strange machinery. Long stays over deep water, far from any land, holding dead still for days. All of it. Exactly what you would do to mine the bottom. And exactly what you would do to rob it. The Glomar Explorer was real. The mining was not. And in the summer of 1974, she sailed out over the grave of K-129 and began to feed 3 miles of pipe into the sea. Below her, the Soviets had no idea their lost submarine had ever been found. Above her, a handful of men set about the most audacious theft of the Cold War. In total silence, with the whole world watching the wrong thing. The lift took place over several days in the late summer of 1974. Clementine settled onto the seabed, closed her arms around the wreck of K-129, and began to rise. And then, partway up, something failed. Several of the claw's great steel fingers gave way, and the submarine they had waited 6 years and spent a fortune to capture broke apart in their grip. By most accounts, the larger part of K-129 tore loose and fell back to the bottom of the sea. Only a forward section reached the surface and came up into the ship. What, exactly, was inside that section is where this story passes behind a door that has never been opened. Officially, the United States has said almost nothing for 50 years. What has surfaced in fragments suggests the Americans recovered part of the hull, some equipment, perhaps 2 nuclear torpedoes, and the remains of 6 Soviet sailors. They gave those 6 men a burial. At sea, with honors, with prayers read aloud in their own language. And they filmed it. A small, deliberate act of decency, 3 miles above where the rest of the crew still lay. But it stayed secret, like all the rest. The families learned the fate of even those 6 only many years later. The film of the burial was not handed over until 1992. 18 years on. To a different country by then, on the other side of a fallen wall. As for everything else, the Soviets always believed the Americans had taken the things that mattered most. The code books. The cipher machines. The keys to a navy's secrets. And at least some of the warheads. Whether that is true, the United States will not say. When a reporter, years later, simply asked, the CIA gave an answer so useful it has outlived the whole affair, that it could neither confirm nor deny that any of it had ever happened. There was to have been a second attempt to recover the part that fell. Then, in 1975, the secret broke in the newspapers. The cover was gone, and the operation was quietly buried, with so much else. So this is where it rests. We know the Americans listened and found her and built an impossible machine and tore part of her off the floor of the sea in the summer of 1974. What we do not know is what came up in that steel claw and what slipped out of it. How many of her warheads the Americans carried away, and how many are still down there in the dark where she fell the second time. The greater part of K-129 lies, to this day, 3 miles beneath the central Pacific. Her crew are still aboard her, and the last known position of the nuclear weapons that went down with her is a wound in the seabed, opened twice by 2 nations, neither of which will say what it holds. After that, unknown.